Welcome to Rage Against the Mainstream, your full spectrum source for all things music, insight, and opinion. Today's date is October 25th, 2021. My name is Bill, and I'm joined here today with Michael.
Hello, everybody.
So, obviously, as you guys can tell that are watching this on YouTube, and if you're not watching it, you should be, we have changed spaces. We are no longer in the bedroom. We are back into a basement. So everything comes full circle here on this show.
Is that a demotion or a promotion?
I guess
or just a lateral move.
Yeah. it's lateral.
Lateral, okay.
So that explains the inactivity for the past couple weeks. Steve, I'm not sure if he's still at bowling school or if he wound up going to space camp yet. He's going to one or the other. So eventually he'll be back at some point.
Did he go up with William Shatner in Space Camp?
You know what? I forgot to ask him.
Oh, jeez.
So how about that? That's crazy, isn't it? The William Shatner thing.
90 years old and up.
He said something when he came back down. He's like staring down at the Earth, like it brought a tear to his eye to see like what we're doing to the planet.
And going up the darkness, he felt he was staring into death. But then he wrote something on Twitter or Instagram. It was just one big long run-on sentence, and I didn't make any sense at all. So I think he had a little bit of oxygen deprivation while he was up there. Because if you read what he wrote, it would. I don't know.
I didn't read it.
He's 90, so he can write whatever he wants.
And plus, he's William Shatner.
William Shatner.
He has the gift of gab. Like, he's that guy. Yeah. So, in the past few weeks, actually, I think you might have been one of the last episodes we did before we took this 2-week break.
Oh, okay.
So, you're like a regular now. Like,
okay.
I might as well take Steve's name off the placard on the wall. Have you encountered anything new or interesting in the past however long?
Yes, I was just reading the other day about Buddy Rich.
Okay.
Who is one of the greatest drummers of all time.
Oh, absolutely.
He influenced I guess you would call the first wave of modern drummers. Many consider him definitely in the top 10 drummers of all time, even though he played back in the 50s. He never knew how to read music.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. And he did all the big band stuff.
He did all these big band arrangements, and he did like West Side Story. He did like a 10, 15 minute West Side Story medley, and he did all these different medleys for big band, but he never read music. So he just did it all by ear, just telling people what to do and what parts to play.
Yeah.
And I was like, amazing. I guess, that shows how much of a genius he was. He was able to hear everything and just play it.
Well, like even today, like with the caliber of musicians that are out there now, to watch his videos are still amazing.
Yes.
Like he's undeniably one of the best of all time. I mean, you can't deny it.
No. Like there was Gene Krupa, and then there was Buddy Rich. Mm-hmm. And then there was everybody else. Came after that.
Yeah,
First there was Krupa, then there was Buddy Rich, and then came everybody else. And that's.
Yeah, and if anyone out there has not watched any videos on Buddy Rich, I would highly suggest doing so.
Yeah, he does a duel against Animal on the
Muppets or whatever.
The Muppets. He does. There's a drummer's duel with.
Didn't that end as a draw?
Yeah.
Later to be recreated by Dave Grohl.
Yes.
He did that, I think, for the Muppets movie or something. They ended in a draw as well. That's funny. With Steve not around, I'm still in contact with him all the time.
Okay.
Recently, he sent me over that this is some easy listening type music. I think you might really enjoy this, Michael. The band's name is Blood Red Throne. The album is Union of Flesh and Machine. And the song that he sent me, and I actually went out and listened to the album based off of this, is called Merry Whispers of Death. These are the kind of conversations that we have. But, yeah, I mean, for those fans of extreme metal, you won't be disappointed. I'm not going to say this is going to be like the gatekeepers to get you into this type of music. You have to have this acquired taste if you're going to like this. But yeah, so that was my new and interesting. Well, at least music wise. On TV they started playing, or they just came out with that show Chucky on USA and Sci-Fi, and
I watched the first episode.
I wasn't a giant fan. I'm not gonna lie.
No, it kind of didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's just like it took away all of the it took the doll and made him a character. I mean, he's always been a character, but it's, at least in the movies, there was always some, like, is it him? Is it not him? You know, and it was just like out in the open within the first 5 minutes. Like, oh, okay, so we're doing this now. But
when that original movie came out, that was scary.
Oh, I can imagine.
It scared me.
I remember watching it for the first time as a kid.
And I was in my 20s, and it was scary. It was scary. It's at that time, my daughter had a doll that talked, and it had batteries in it, and it scared me. So I took the batteries out.
Yeah.
And I put it in the closet, and it still kept talking. I ran out of the room. Then I came back in and realized there were more batteries in the back of the head. Oh, and that's why it was still talking. Here I thought it was Chuck. It was really Chucky talking. And that's a true story. It scared me. I hid it in the back of the closet, and it was still talking.
Well, I mean, I can't sit here and talk too much shit. I was scared of Chucky until I was like 16. Yeah. I thought he was real. But yeah, I mean, that first movie, it stands the test of time. It's insanely good, and the practical effects in it made that movie what it was. I mean, all the rest of them started getting like computer animated and stuff.
It was a good story too. It was a good story.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you go into it not knowing anything about the series at all, you're convinced for the first half of the movie that the kid's actually the one killing people, and it's just like it made that psychological thriller. And then when that scene, when he comes to life actually happens, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Nothing like that had ever been done before.
And plus, and with any movie, it was a good cast.
Yeah. Chris Sarandon
is great, and he was great in that movie. And
Catherine Hicks, she was great in it.
Yeah, so it was, the cast, again, makes a good story even better.
Yep. Well, check out Child's Play franchise, I guess. That's another new and interesting.
On this day in music history.
On this day in music history, October 25th, 1976, Bruce Springsteen plays the Philadelphia Spectrum. It's a big deal because Bruce has said that he'd never play a large sports arena. Concerned about getting the sound right, he orders a 2-hour sound check before the show. That is insane. Like nowadays, it's like 30-minute sound check, and you don't even do it. It's always like the road crew.
Yeah, standing. Yeah. Well, you needed a 2-hour sound check at the Spectrum because it was a horrible sounding place. It sounded so bad in there that we nicknamed it the Philadelphia Rectum.
The Rectum?
Yeah, because it sounded so bad. You just couldn't get a good sound in there. And no matter where you put the stage, they tried it in the round. They tried it half, this end. It was just a bad sounding room. It really was.
Now, that was the same Spectrum that it was until they tore it down, right?
Yeah.
I saw Ozzy there. And Well, I mean, at the time, like I didn't know any better, but I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then when I go back and watch like videos from that show, like on YouTube, it's not god awful.
Yeah. It's the echoing and
It's such a big, or what was such a big venue.
Yes. At that time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And technology has come such a long way.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the best place back in the 70s, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but the best place to see a concert in the 70s was the Tower.
Okay.
Because it was an old movie theater, a big movie theater in Upper Darby. And for those of you who aren't from around here listening to this, it's a 120-year-old movie theater. I mean, it didn't even have air conditioning. They used to drag giant blocks of ice upstairs to the roof with fans to keep people cool. But the acoustics in there were incredible. Anybody that came to Philadelphia, the first time they came, they would want to play the Tower.
Okay.
Genesis played there the first time. David Bowie played there. Hall & Oates wanted to play the Tower. And in fact, David Bowie's first live album
was recorded there
at the Tower because the sound was so good there.
Well, I guess it also had something to do with all like the sound dampeners in there, like the carpets, the walls, everything.
It was built for that.
For acoustics.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But the spectrum was just, but then as you got into the 80s and sound equipment got better, and by the time the Spectrum closed and the new place opened, it sounded better because the equipment was better and they had more technology to get it to sound better. So that's why when you go to a concert at the Wells Fargo Center or whatever it's called now, it sounds better.
Yeah.
Because they have better equipment. It's a bigger place, so you think it would echo more, but the technology and everything they have makes it sound good.
Well, it also makes sense for those guys to get there like a couple days in advance and set up what was it? Was it that Genesis one we were watching and the guys had the sound equipment in the seats, like checking the sound levels, or was that something else? Okay, yeah, it was that then.
Yeah, plus with technology, the sound man can walk around the room and with his little iPad check, okay, how's the sound up here? How's the sound over here? And then when the room fills up, it sounds even different.
Yeah.
But it's just the technology's there to simulate.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, because now with all the soundboards and everything and the plugins that are available, you could one-click preset and now it sounds fine.
Yeah.
I always thought that would be cool to get into that kind of thing.
And this back in the 70s like that, they just piled up as many speakers as they could. And got as many amps as they could and put the sound guy in the back of the room and just went with it.
I heard that's why basically why Marshall came up with like the full stack idea. It was because of Pete Townsend from The Who.
Yeah.
He actually wanted an 8x12 cabinet, single big cabinet, and they went out making it, 2 4x12 cabinets and pretty much just to push sound.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there was no PAs like we have now.
No.
There definitely wasn't any direct in there either.
No. Yeah, when the Beatles did their first tour in the 60s, they just had a bunch of those Shure Master columns, and you never heard them because of everybody screaming.
Yeah.
So you never heard a note they played. It's technology. It's all technology.
That's funny.
Okay, here we go. 1977, Elton John appears on The Muppet Show, where he performs Crocodile Rock, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and Don't Go Breaking My Heart. Elton is one of the inspirations for Dr. Teeth of the Muppets house band, The Electric Mayhem. I remember watching that episode.
Really?
Yes.
That's funny.
They started having all kinds of celebrities on.
Well, back then the Muppet Show wasn't a kids thing, right? It was like an adult type variety show, right?
It was both. Kids could watch it, and adults would like to watch it too because they would have special guests.
Yeah. So
everybody was on the show singing. Every
yeah, so it wasn't like strictly like a kid's show. No. Like, it came on later too, right?
Yep, it came on in the evening, probably like 7, 8 o'clock or whatever.
So I remember seeing videos of like Alice Cooper on there. I've seen the Elton John one, the Buddy Rich one. I've seen a couple of them, and it's just like it's funny because stuff like that doesn't happen anymore.
No.
There is no shows like that on the current.
No, it was funny. I mean, it was a funny show watching these rock stars interact with puppets, and they had to tone it down a little because they were on prime time.
Yeah.
So but it came off good.
That's funny.
It's funny when they say Dr. Teeth. The Muppets. I thought he was more of. I'm trying to think of who the person is. Dr. John. I thought he was meant to be I thought that's Dr. Teeth was Dr. John was the inspiration for Dr. Teeth. Okay. That's new for me.
Moving along here to 1993, Time magazine puts Eddie Vedder on the cover with the headline "All the Rage." Both Vedder and Kurt Cobain refused to speak with the magazine for the story, but they run it anyway in an attempt to explain why young people are listening to such angry music. See, I mean, well, this is where it's cool to get your perspective on this, because when I listened to grunge for the first time, I never saw it as like angry music at all. It was just like I mean, I guess by that point in time, it was just like normal. It was like normal to hear Nirvana on the radio, and like I'd already listened to their songs a million times before I actually knew who they were. Is that how it was like perceived, or is that how you perceived grunge back in the 90s?
It was like, I guess you would call it another wave of anti-establishment music. Okay. Anti high school norms, the athletes being the cool kids and society only accepting a certain type of person. It was anti that. Yeah. So it was really angry music, but it wasn't over the top angry music.
Yeah, it was like a more commercialized, yes, like punk rock, basically. Yeah, with a melody.
Yeah. And it did want to go against the establishment. What was established at the time. Yeah, and that's what I think that's what grunge was all about.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay. 1997, during a concert in Flint, Michigan. A lot of stuff happens in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, right.
Johnny Cash tells the crowd he has Parkinson's disease after he falls over trying to pick up a guitar pick. The crowd thinks he's joking, but Cash's manager confirms it in a statement 2 days later. And Johnny Cash lived a long life, and he was able to keep playing even though he had Parkinson's for a while.
Yeah. Well, when did he die? He died in the early 2000s, didn't he? Let's look this up.
I know that he moved to, I want to say Jamaica.
Okay.
And that's where he spent the remainder of his life.
2003.
Okay.
So he lived for another 6 years with Parkinson's. That's crazy. I mean, Johnny Cash is another one of those. He's another one of those like pivotal people, or pivotal artists in this time period. He's he was like the next Elvis, and he was able to keep it like consistent until like the late 80s, early 90s. He was extremely consistent the whole way through his career.
He brought country music more mainstream.
Yeah.
Because his music was not country and western. It was considered country and western, but it was more mainstream. Yeah. And people would listen to it.
I'm partial to the super group that he did with Chris Christopherson and Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, the Highwaymen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I heard that for the first time, I was like, oh my God. Like that's amazing.
That's a great group of musicians.
Oh, yeah.
What's next? Okay. You're next.
No, you're next. Oh, yeah, I'm next. Duh. I'm sitting here waiting for you. Next here, in the year 2000, SoundScan announces first week sales of 1.054 million album sales for Limp Bizkit's Chocolate Starfish and the hot dog flavored water. It is the last rock studio album to sell 1 million copies in a week. I remember, well, I mean, obviously I don't remember because I wasn't alive then, but like where that was nothing. Like 1 million albums in a week, that was just like okay, Bon Jovi put out Slippery When Wet, 1 million sales first week.
Yeah, pre-orders, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just funny too. It's really funny that album was the last one to sell that. I mean, I like Limp Bizkit and I like that album, but it's just funny that they hold, like, I guess that they're the gatekeepers of this in a way.
Well, after this is when people would put songs out. You know, they would drop songs and have it one song at a time, or the album, they would drop it all the time. Then people would download it. It was the change. I guess you call it changing of the guard from one medium to another.
Yeah.
And 2000s is right about when it happened.
Yeah. That's just wild.
Yeah. Just always used to run to the music store to hold the first day an album came out, to hold it in your hands and buy it.
Yeah.
Open it up and see what was on the inside and the liner notes and the pictures and all that. And
yeah, that's not a thing anymore.
Nah. And it was so cool the way they designed the cover, and you know, who designed this cover? And they said,
I mean, I think, well, the whole vinyl thing is starting to make a comeback now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely not to the point of what it was, but you know, it's now moved from like the indie hipster type thing to more, you know, more of a commercialized thing. I mean, they sell vinyls at Walmart now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm no, what's the word I'm looking for here? Regardless, I do the same shit. I go to Walmart and buy my vinyl. Exception. There we go. I'm no exception. I buy vinyl at Walmart because it's cheap. I mean, you could pick up, I think I picked up Metallica's Ain't Justice for All and Metallica's Black album for like $25, $27. Like that's cheap.
Yep.
You know, and it's all 180 gram, like it's good quality vinyl. But I think that's definitely the turning point now, to the fact that you can get it in these places. You go to Target and get vinyl. You're not buying it at Urban Outfitters anymore.
Yeah, and I remember, and not too long ago, that was the place you had to go. Yeah, stores like that to get it.
And they only had like the indie hipster type stuff, like, you know, it's cool to like David Bowie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm the first vinyl album I ever bought, I do believe, was "Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player" from Elton John.
Oh wow!
I think that was 1972, and it was the first vinyl. Yeah. And you went to We3 Records.
Where was that at?
I was in a mall near me, like Dade Mall. We3 was a big chain.
Okay.
Before Sam Goody and bought them up and all that kind of. Yeah, they started getting. It was the local record store, had all the 45s and all the albums. And yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. Okay, 2006. Forbes declares Kurt Cobain the top earning dead celebrity, beating out Elvis Presley, John Lennon, Johnny Cash, George Harrison, Ray Charles, and Bob Marley.
Which is very surprising. I mean, yeah, it is surprising because Elvis has a very dedicated fan base, and Graceland and all of the Elvis memorabilia that is sold at every corner convenience store. John Lennon with the Beatles stuff, Johnny Cash. I can see Kurt Cobain beating out Johnny Cash, but it's surprising that he beats out John Lennon and George Harrison. Bob Marley, it surprises me too, because, I mean, you can't go 10 feet down the boardwalk there in Wildwood without seeing someone with a pot leaf shirt with Bob Marley's face on it. I mean, unless he's not getting anything for it.
Is it a changeover of the generation? You know, like this is the people who were Elvis fans are dying out.
Yeah.
Aren't Elvis fans, you know, Beatle fans are dying out who would want to buy something from John Lennon or George Harrison, Ray Charles, even Bob Marley. I mean, he was the reggae king, but still, they're looking at the newer stuff that they know that when they were alive, when they were born, and that's kind of the turning over.
Yeah, I guess it's just in a way that makes sense. And then it's just like, who's gonna beat out Kurt Cobain? Is it gonna be like, I don't know, Ed Sheeran?
Where's Michael Jackson?
Yeah, well, you would think Michael Jackson. Well, 2006, Michael Jackson wasn't dead yet.
Okay, right.
I think he died in like 2008 or something. I'll look this one up too while we're talking about this.
Yeah, when did he die? Was it
Michael Jackson? June 25th, 2009.
9, okay.
So 2009, he still had another 3 years Kurt Cobain had to hold on to the title. Actually, I wonder if Forbes has an updated list of this. Dead celebrities. Forbes dead celebrities. Michael Jackson, number 1. Okay, here we go. Highest paid dead celebrities of 2020. Michael Jackson at $48 million. Dr. Seuss at $33 million. Charles Schultz at 32.5.
Michael C. died.
Yeah.
Arnold Palmer, yeah.
Forbes dead musicians. Okay, Michael Jackson. Then Elvis Presley. Yeah, I guess.
Who are the top earning dead celebrities of all time? Right, the highest.
Yeah, Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson for a long time.
Yeah, it's going to take a very long time. Because Michael Jackson's at what? Well, let me go back to the initial list here. Michael Jackson's $60 million.
Yeah, somebody.
$60 million, and then the next step is Dr. Seuss with $33 million. So you got, a good $27 million to even catch up to Michael Jackson and then pass him. Like that's a lot of money.
And Michael Jackson's still selling stuff.
Yeah, and I think he still owns the Beatles catalog too, or at least his estate does. Michael Jackson's estate will be doing very good for a very long time. So, going back to what you were talking about a couple seconds ago with the generational thing and everything moving forward, and it's just like a reciprocating thing. I think it would be kind of fun to talk about like the different generations and artists that kind of defined those generations. Obviously, you would have a little bit more, insight into this one than I would, but I definitely have a list of ones that I feel like ones that would fit. So I'm guessing we'd probably go from like baby boomers to like Gen Z. Because I feel like that's like a big enough gap, and I feel like we can hit a pretty decent chunk of music within those people, you know what I mean? Or within those groups. So who do you have starting out here with the baby boomers?
Well, each of these, you can kind of split up into like two parts, because you're talking, each one's about 20 years or a little under 20 years. So you're spanning decades, and once you start getting into the 50s, things started changing so fast. So when you're talking about baby boomers, or the people born right before, baby boomers started right after the war in 46. But people were born during the war, and the early baby boomers, the main turning point would be before the war or during the war. You're still talking about swing. You're still talking about Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden along comes Elvis and changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Elvis singing the blues and becoming the roots of rock and roll.
Yeah.
And he was the main linchpin that started turning everything. So he's one of the largest influencer of all time of actually changing music.
Well, he took it to a place too where you talk about like Sinatra and like the Rat Pack and stuff like that, like the whole big band thing.
Yeah.
And Elvis took it back to took it to a very stripped down, that basically would essentially would become like the standard for a band.
Right. Guitar,
like a
bass,
4-piece
drums.
band.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just kind of funny that it took for somebody like that to like kind of strip it down to bring music to, I mean, even besides like the musical like influence that he would have, the fact of him like stripping that down and like you have like like Chuck Berry and like Muddy Waters and those kind of guys, and that's all very stripped down, like bare bones type thing, and like it's not this big huge flashy thing. I mean, obviously Elvis took that approach very later on, but
well, he was again born and raised in the South, the Southern, the black blues, the early roots of rock and roll,
mm-hmm.
and he took that and made it popular.
Yeah,
and made kind of started towards rock and roll.
Yeah,
and I had some other people listed too around him. You said Little Richard.
Oh yeah,
Bo Diddley, Ray Charles. You said Muddy Waters, Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, and then Miles Davis. He's in another little category, whatever, more jazz, but still,
yeah,
very the influence of that coming out front. But Elvis was the big one. He's the one that changed it all.
Yeah, and he's the one that's still on Forbes' list too.
And then from there, when you start getting into the baby boomers, of course, it becomes 64 and the Beatles, when the Beatles hit America. And that, again, changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you had Elvis starting it, and then along came the Beatles, which took it to the next level of this rock and roll. I mean, they were a skiffle band, and then going in and they discovered this thing, rock and roll, by listening to American blues.
Yep.
They got this idea, this rock and roll thing. And that's where the Beatles got it. And so they did it, and then they brought it back over to America up to the next level.
Yeah.
And so the Beatles so you can kind of say the Beatles and the baby boomers also, that started with Elvis and then the main influence, and then went to the Beatles.
Mm-hmm. And then, boomers. In there you'd have like the beginnings of like the Who and Led Zeppelin, like the Yardbirds rather,
Mm-hmm.
Cream. You have all that kind of stuff in the very beginning of that.
The Doors.
Yeah, the Doors.
The Kinks. And then the Stones. Don't forget the Stones.
Oh, yeah.
And Jimi Hendrix.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Dylan being the folk, the starting of the folk singer kind of thing, the Bob Dylan, and the Protests.
Yeah.
The Protests.
Do you think that he would be like he would be someone that you consider to be like an icon of that generation?
Yep.
I know he's like one of the bigger and more celebrated ones. Bob Dylan is.
Yes, definitely. I mean, you have Simon and Garfunkel, but Bob Dylan's like the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's Bob Dylan, and then also you still have the soul. I have Aretha Franklin.
Yeah,
started in the 60s. That's a woman. That whole thing with Motown and that being such a influential person.
Yeah, like Diana Ross and like all that stuff. I mean, it's kind of funny too, because as we go later on in this list, Michael Jackson's going to get brought up multiple times. But like even now, like in this particular time period with the Jackson 5, like they were
starting. Yep,
exactly.
Yep, and and the Beach Boys, of course, over here in America with the beach music. You know, I guess that you would call it
surf rock.
Surf rock, yeah.
Surf rock.
Yeah. So, I mean, the baby boomers had all that going, all the roots of all this stuff starting. And, I mean, the baby boomers, they say, go up to born in 64. That's the cutoff point. So, again, these baby boomers, they would actually be growing up kind of in the 70s, since I'm a late baby boomer. So then you start getting into the 70s. So the baby boomers all of a sudden cover like 3 decades. They cover the 50s, the 60s, and also the 70s, where, you know, when you have Led Zeppelin and, God, you start getting all the psychedelic bands like Pink Floyd.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get the reggae thing with Bob Marley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Led Zeppelin was probably the most influential in the 70s as far as the band goes.
Well, you'd have Black Sabbath, too.
And Black Sabbath, right.
Yeah, Black Sabbath, I think. Well, I mean, I've always considered like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath to be like both to be equally influential. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like Led Zeppelin was like the straight A, like perfect, like son. And then you had Black Sabbath, who was like
the bad boys.
Yeah, exactly. You had Black Sabbath, who was like the, you know, your brother's or like your nephew that you just had to take in because he just wasn't working out at the school he was in.
and then also with the late baby boomers into the 70s, you had the start of the glam rock or the single artists with the bands like David Bowie, Alice Cooper, Elton John, that glam rock kind of thing. I guess you would call it glam rock or single people fronting bands and coming back to that again. And then again, with the folk music, you had very influential, again, with women was Joni Mitchell.
Yeah.
That whole folk song. So there's so many different people you can talk about. When you talk about major influences, I mean, Stevie Wonder was such a huge influence, just being such an excellent musician that he was, and being able to play all different kinds of music. Mm-hmm. And anytime he came out with an album, it was just this huge hit. And he was very influential in the music business.
Oh yeah,
for black people to be that popular.
Well, he also surrounded himself with very good people, very good producers, you know, Quincy Jones, and, you know, just his whole team around him.
It makes a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
And again, back, you have somebody else who was very influential during the 70s, Marvin Gaye. People don't realize what Marvin Gaye did. He brought that whole soulful R&B. It just brought it. Yeah, he brought it forward, and people still listen to Marvin Gaye. Mm-hmm. He still has this amazing influence, you know. And he was in the 70s.
Well, I feel like the R&B thing always kind of gets like swallowed up because it wasn't such a not like a huge genre. Like it was there, but it was never like predominant and out front ever. Because you always had, you know, like the Led Zeppelins and the Who and stuff like that, like out in the forefront.
And then you start moving towards the late 70s, and we talk about Generation X, which is known as the MTV generation, because I mean Generation X is 65 to 1980, so they grew up.
Yep.
When MTV started, I think it was 82.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, MTV was 82. So they grew up only knowing like MTV as their source of music.
Yeah, and that's the thing too.
It was instant
1981,
music.
August 1st, 1981.
So the music was right in front of you. You just turn the TV on.
Yeah.
And each song came out with a new everybody came out with a song. They came out with a video to go along with it.
Yep.
So it changed it. It was instantly available. You didn't have to sit there and listen to the radio for an hour waiting for your song to come back on. Your song to be played again. It would play on 2-hour rotation or 4-hour rotation. And you didn't have the album or whatever. You wanted to hear a song again. You would have to sit there and wait for the radio to play it again. MTV would play it more often.
Yeah. Because there was less videos.
There was videos back then.
And see, that's the thing too. I mean, this is where I tend to think this is like the best generation of music. I love 80s music.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once again, Michael Jackson.
Yeah, he was the king of pop. He made the 80s.
Yeah.
He took MTV, he took the video thing to another level.
Yep.
Everybody had to follow him, and all the videos had to be well produced and everything. And so he was the king of pop.
And also, I feel like right now, too, with Generation X and the tail end of this, music started to get grittier again. Like, you have bands like, obviously, we couldn't get through an episode without me mentioning Van Halen.
Right.
But then, you had bands like Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses, right.
I mean, if there was ever an epitome for a dirty type band, it would be Guns N' Roses. And they kind of even went into the next, the next generation as well. But, you started to get like working in reverse now, because you had these rock bands that were influenced by like the Stones and the Who and everything. Like the Beatles influence is now kind of almost gone by this point, and they're pulling the influences from these old blues guys, and now the music's starting to. I feel like with the technology that was available, it was getting better, but it was also kind of regressing in like the whole giant stature to eventually what would become grunge.
And Prince, again, I mean, you talk about Michael Jackson, but there's also Prince.
Yeah.
Who's a lot, it took for him to kind of, to die for people to start to realize, hey, this guy was a real genius.
Yeah, he was.
He played so many different instruments, such a great sound, and broke down barriers. I mean, he was a big part of the 80s also.
Yeah.
Always had great videos, great stage show, great stage presence.
Yep.
And he could
Purple Rain.
I mean, and he was just an amazing musician.
Yeah. Incredible guitar player. People never talk about how good of a guitar player he was.
I mean, out there in the middle of the rain playing at the halftime show at the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
He's out there pouring rain playing, and people are watching. My God. It's like, wow.
There was a video that I saw on YouTube not long ago of him playing bass on like one of like the newer songs that he did. And he sounds like the most seasoned funk bass player you've ever heard in your life. He's just one of those people. He's in like a totally different realm of musician. I mean, like you have like guys like Dave Grohl and like I don't know. I always feel like Dave Grohl and Prince are like in their own like realm of like these multi-instrumentalists that are very good at everything they do.
Right. And there's another video of Prince. It was the George Harrison tribute concert. Okay. So George Harrison's son's up there playing. They're playing While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And they're at the end of the song, and he's up there with Tom Petty. Let's see. Is it Eric Clapton? He's up there with the guy from ELO. I just can't think of his name right now. The guitar player from ELO. These mega stars playing, and everybody's taking turns taking the solo. All of a sudden, he comes out to get his solo. He goes up, stands on the speaker, and he wails away for like 3 or 4 minutes on the solo, and everybody else just stands back and lets him go. And he's just wailing, and it was just absolutely amazing. Yeah, everybody's just let him go.
I'm gonna have to watch that.
He's like, you're like, wow, and he just keeps going and going, and you're like, it just keeps getting better and better. And then finally he comes back onto the stage, and and the guys are all standing there looking at him like, keep going. It's like, because he was, it sounded so, it was, he just showed, I mean, I guess they already knew, but how great a musician he was. Oh, yeah. And how he's one of those guys that when he took the stage, everybody watched.
Yeah.
You know, and there's not that many musicians like that when they take the stage. I mean, there's Elvis.
Yeah.
When he came on stage, everybody stopped what they were doing and watched Elvis. Same with Prince. Every time he came on the stage, you stopped and you watched.
Yeah.
It's like Michael Jackson. When he came on stage, you stopped what you're doing and you watched.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when he did his halftime show for the Super Bowl, which kind of changed halftime shows for the Super Bowl. And that from that point, there was pre-Michael Jackson and there was after Michael Jackson.
What year was that, Michael? Or around like what time?
Had to be late 80s.
Okay.
Before that, it was marching bands.
Yeah.
You know, medleys, Up With People, all this really stupid halftime shows. And all of a sudden, okay, we're going to have Michael Jackson. And then it just went, they've been trying to match it ever since. And it's been very few people have been able to match.
Michael Jackson Super Bowl halftime show took place on January 31st, 1993.
Oh, that late. Okay.
Yeah.
But before that, it was just halftime shows, time fillers.
Yeah.
Then after he did it,
then it became a production.
It became, wow, how are we going to everybody's been trying to outdo it ever since.
Yeah. Right.
For the last 20 years. and you can't, it's really hard to do.
Yeah. I mean,
certain people are like that, certain musicians, and Prince was one of them.
Yeah.
Prince and Michael Jackson were both one of those people that when they came up on stage, you had to stop what you're doing and watch them.
Yeah.
Because you didn't want to miss it.
I think Michael Jackson might be one of the most important artists of all time.
Yeah. Really. He was the king of pop.
Yeah.
They called Elvis the king of rock and roll, and Michael Jackson was the queen of pop. But then we get into Generation Y, which is 1981 to 1996, when
this is when things get dark.
All of my children were born in that range. And that's when, you know, you go from the late 80s, which had that heavy metal comeback.
Yeah.
With bands like Poison and the glam, you know, the bands.
Yeah, big hair.
Yeah. And it got into the 90s, which started the whole grunge.
Yep.
Nirvana being the most influential band, and maybe again one of the most influential bands of all time.
Yeah,
it changed music.
I'm more partial to Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains over Nirvana, but I mean you can't deny what Nirvana did.
Right.
I mean, I always think that it could have been any of those bands if it had been the right time for them. Like I feel like if it was, you know, like Alice in Chains put out, you know, Facelift in 92 instead of Nevermind or whatever,
right.
Like it would have been a different story. But you can't deny what they did.
And you're right. The same with Pearl Jam. They did this, it was and Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
You know,
well, you got Smashing Pumpkins. You got Stone Temple Pilots. You have Soundgarden. Soundgarden was another huge one. You know. And it's funny, too, because there are so many other bands from that era or that, you know, genre that no one ever really talks about. You know, you have like Green River, you have Tad, you have all these other bands and, you know, Mad Season. No one ever really talks about them at all because everything gets overshadowed by Nirvana. I think that's where my distaste for Nirvana comes from.
Radiohead.
Yeah.
Beck. And then there was a band that always kind of, I don't know why, but again, when you get into the 90s and the whole generation, I think is Oasis.
Oh, yeah.
Every time I listen to a song by Oasis, it's just me. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
It's just
the brothers are douchebags.
It just, to me, it sounds like just a bunch of chords played together.
Yeah.
But the popularity can't be denied of Oasis.
Well, I think
that was their
it's
era
one of those
also.
British things.
Yeah, I guess it is.
You know, I never caught the whole Oasis thing. Like I tried, I watched the documentary. I tried it. I can't get into them. I've never liked Oasis.
I played a few of their songs. It's like, okay, all I'm doing is playing chords. I'm just playing chords. and okay, I'm done. Okay, what happened?
Well, also, I feel like with some of these bands, with the exceptions like Pearl Jam and, Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and those bands, but some of that music is extremely simple. Like, music started getting very simple. You go from, the 80s where you have, like, it's like the era of the Guitar Hero, and now it's like these songs don't have solos anymore.
Nope.
And they're just stripped, bare bone shells of what could have been a bigger song. But
Garage band.
Exactly.
Era. It was more about the message. It was more about the message than the music.
Yeah.
In the 80s, it was a lot about the music.
Yep.
One band we forgot about the 80s, U2.
Oh, yeah. They were another one. Huge
worldwide phenomenon. Very influential around the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
Their music had the political message.
Yeah.
Being where they were from, all around the world, the political messages I forgot to mention them. They were very influential.
How could you ever forget? They only pushed their whole album on your iPhone.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you're an Android guy.
But back to the 90s and Generation Y, and then you start to get into the popularity of hip hop. And first you got the Beastie Boys,
mm-hmm.
which I thought, again, unbelievably influential.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these white guys.
Yeah.
And they're doing this stuff, and it's like, I hear a Beastie Boys song today, I go, this is really good.
Yeah.
This is good stuff.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they were another one of those like right place, right time acts. I mean, they were a punk band before they decided to be a rap group.
Yeah. But they again, the whole influence, they were very influential. They brought it mainstream.
They influenced Eminem.
Yeah. Yes. Right. And I have Eminem listed as in the next generation.
Yeah.
That's how I have listed there. Yeah. And then that started again. We're still in Generation Y, but we're starting to go into Generation Z, which started, people were born in 1997 and up to 2012. That whole 15 years or so, that's when that Eminem, I would say, well, you got Green Day, Linkin Park, but then you have Beyonce and Jay-Z, that whole...
Yeah. Well, you started to see a real shift in like music where it has totally went away from rock bands at this point, and the ones that are still kind of hanging on there are the ones that have already had these legacy type careers, like, Metallica, like bands like that, You had like Rage Against the Machine around that time period, or before then, like you had the whole new metal thing, like Limp Bizkit and Korn and that stuff. But that was also and like the Deftones and stuff like that. But that was also, it was becoming this like very like urban type of music.
Yes.
And
yep.
It was kind of, it was the music for the time. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do like new metal. There's a place for it in history, but it's very like dated type music. Hip hop, however, that shit lasts forever. There's no getting rid of hip hop.
Who's some other influential artists? There was one that I found influential, which was Amy Winehouse. I found her influential.
Oh yeah.
Again, as far as a woman coming in with rock and roll and that whole thing, her style, the Bad Girls style, and that thing, I think that was very influential.
Well, you had like Katy Perry and Lady Gaga and like all those other girls, and they're women artists, and then you had Amy Winehouse come out, and it was just like I go back to the whole like gritty, like bare bones, stripped down, no frills thing, and that was Amy Winehouse, and that's what made her so great.
Right, and then we got another band. God, the 80s was a great decade. Another band I forgot from the 80s was the Police.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was again influence. They influenced that whole reggae
I wonder if you can even like pass off the police and just say Sting as a whole.
Yeah. Right. That style, the singing, the drums, the sparseness. I guess you call it sparseness of the music being a 3-piece.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I'm talking about early the Police. I mean, later on they got more commercial.
Yeah.
Started layering keyboards in and became, but in the beginning it was just so sparse and so.
I've always had a thing for trios. I've always had a thing for power trios.
And you listen to the early Police stuff from Roxanne to Message in a Bottle, and the stuff is like there's a lot there, but there really isn't.
Yeah.
But yet it's musical and it was very influential to a lot of bands, that kind of reggae sound. I mean, to a lot of bands picked up that sound.
Yeah.
Even local bands around here, the Hooters.
Yeah.
Who were based in Philadelphia. They were originally like that kind of reggae type, rock reggae type sound.
Okay.
In the 80s. In the mid 80s, and they were influenced by the Police. And so, I mean, that was the 80s, but I just keep thinking of things from the 80s.
See, it just goes to show you the 80s was a magical time period.
But then now, I mean, back to where we are now. Generation Y, Generation Z, when you're talking about now, today's music, I mean, you have people that are, Adele has become so influential.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's another one of those artists that, she's, in my opinion, I think she's one of the last ones with true raw talent.
Mm-hmm.
Like she just has it. Like she is that artist. She has the abilities to be able to sing and sing very, very well. And yeah, I mean, she's definitely, as popular as she should be. Like I'm not gonna be like, she's underrated, but she definitely isn't as thought of as a good vocalist. You know what I mean? Like she's like the pop artist, but it's like she's an incredibly good vocalist.
Yep. I mean, and you get into the younger generation. I mean, you have those other people that they look at, Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga, and now the big ones, with Ed Sheeran and all of these newer, younger musicians. Even Justin Bieber, had this very influential, being the young kid and doing again the grittier side.
Yeah,
on all the boy bands, of course, but getting back to more single people, and away from bands.
Yep.
Drake, Rihanna.
Yeah.
She was big in the 2000s, and Post Malone. All these people, there's single artists now with God knows who behind them. A track playing behind them with 5 guys pretending to play instruments and whatever.
Well, it's kind of funny because Post Malone's producer, Andrew Watt, produced the newest Ozzy Osbourne album and had a revolving cast of musicians on this album. So it's almost like they're trying to take Ozzy from what he was and turn him into like this new like Gen Z Zoomer like kind of fucking guy, and only because he had Post Malone had him on a song for like 15 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, who did Elton John do a song with that was all the rage?
Elton John did a song with.
You see it on the commercial on TV now.
I know he did. I don't know. Let me look this up.
I know who it is. I just can't think of it. Popular.
Elton John. Dua Lipa hit number 1 on Dance Electronic Songs chart. Cold Heart.
It's is it Nas? Is that the guy's name?
Oh, Nas.
Nas, yes.
Yeah, the rapper.
Yes. They did a song together.
Let's see.
And
Lil Nas X. One of Me. That's the song.
Yeah, and it's a big hit.
I'm gonna have to check that out after the show. Huh, ain't that something? It's kind of funny. They have these like older artists that they're bringing in or bringing back into light, but into today's mainstream. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't think these guys know who they're fucking around with. Like, this is Elton John you're talking about. Yeah. It's like when Kanye West had Paul McCartney on a song.
Yes.
It was like...
And Lady Gaga did the tour with, oh, God, what's his name? I can't think of his name.
Let me look this up. I love having this TV here now.
Yeah. Lady Gaga just did a tour with, and he just retired.
Lady Gaga toured with, what year was it? 2019 or that?
I know who it is, but I just can't think of his name.
Lady Gaga tour 2019.
Tony Bennett.
Tony Bennett.
Tony Bennett's in his 90s, and he's singing on stage with Lady Gaga, and people are loving it.
Yeah.
He's going around touring, and the poor guy, he had to retire now because his dementia is getting so bad that, you know.
Actually, I did read that somewhere that like he came out on stage or something, or she went out on stage and he recognized her, and it was like a heart-wrenching type moment that like he actually remembered who she was.
Yeah.
He's 95, by the way.
Yeah, he's still out there singing, and it's just wow.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, and they finally told him that he has to stop, and he hardly recognizes anybody anymore, but he's still out there singing on stage, and it's like, whoa. So yeah, like you're saying, the established older singing with the new. I don't know. I guess it's good for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, you have those diehard fans of these older artists. And it's kind of like, okay, well, if they think that, you know, they're all right, then I guess I'll think that they're all right too.
It's giving both of them credibility. It's giving the older star credibility with the young crowd, and it's giving the newer artists credibility with the older crowd.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of becoming the thing now.
I just read here a couple weeks ago, Tony Bennett earns a Guinness World Record for his latest album with Lady Gaga. It says the performer released Love for Sale on October 1st at age 95 and 60 days. The release makes him the oldest person to release an album of new material. The album sees two multi-generational friends sing duets celebrating the music of Cole Porter. Yeah. So, yeah, he got a Guinness World Record for the oldest person to release an album of new material. That's pretty cool. That's definitely cool. So, I guess to kind of wrap this topic up, Michael, do you have a particular generation of music that you like above the rest?
I'm a 70s guy.
Yeah.
I'm a 70s. I think that's when rock and roll got real.
Yeah.
With me liking progressive rock, of course, being my favorite, you know, with Yes and Genesis and Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
And Pink Floyd, all the big progressive bands at that time in the early 70s. And then you have the Led Zeppelin. You have David Bowie, who's another one of my favorites. All these things came out in the 70s. All the music in the 70s was like rock and roll.
Yeah.
You know, it's just nothing too much. I mean, progressive rock was, of course, complicated. But, I mean, the regular rock and roll is just AC/DC. It's just, you know.
Yeah.
Here it is. ZZ Top, here it is. And
yeah.
That's why the 70s has always been my favorite.
I'm going to have to go the next decade up. If this guitar isn't proof of it, or the various shirts that I own, or the bands that I constantly talk about, the 80s is absolutely 100% my favorite generation of music. I feel like the technicality of the musicians got like insane to crazy levels. I mean, even besides the Eddie Van Halen thing, you have guitar players like Reb Beach from, Winger, like incredible guitar player no one ever talks about. You have Jakey Lee, Randy Rhoads, like any of the Ozzy guys. Like it's just, it was the time for the guitar hero.
Yep. Yeah. Well, 70s was a lot of the bands.
Yeah.
The band era.
Yeah. I mean,
but they had even though you had the bands, you had the people in the bands, each person well known. I mean, you had Aerosmith, but who all the people in Aerosmith were. You had Zeppelin, but you knew who all the people in Zeppelin were.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was both, but they were a band.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, that was when like a band was a cohesive unit, and it wasn't like like Adam Levine with Maroon 5, and it's just like, okay, well, I only know Adam Levine. Like you knew John Paul Jones, you knew Jimmy Page, you knew Robert Plant, you knew John Bonham.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think? What's your favorite generation of music? Are we totally off on this one? I mean, these were all facts, so there's really nothing we could be off about. But if you disagree with anything we said, you can find us on our social media accounts. Facebook.com/RATM Podcast, Instagram and Twitter @RATM Podcast. And of course, you can find us on YouTube. YouTube search Rage Against the Mainstream Podcast, or if those aren't enough characters that you want to convey your message, or comment section isn't big enough, you can find us ratmpodcast@gmail.com. But let's move into our suggestions for this week. Do you want to go first for this one, Michael?
Sure, I'm going way off the board for this one. Jazz fusion.
Okay.
It's always been a secret love of mine. From I was a big fan of Dixie Dregs, but I'm going and all those jazz fusion bands, all those different musicians who would play together and form all these different bands. But there's one album that I bought back in the mid '80s, a CD back then. It was Chick Corea's Electric Band. And I think they made 4 albums together, but their first album, he's had John Petrucci on bass, Frank Gambale on guitar, Dave Weckl on drums, and him.
Oh, wow.
It was a 4-piece. And these guys are just, you just listen and you go, and your jaw drops when you listen to these guys. And it's just one of those amazing albums when the 4 guys get together who are just virtuosos and they play together and your head's spinning. And there was one song in there called Got a Match. Like you're asking somebody for a match. Got a match.
Oh, okay.
And you listen to it and you're going, my God. It makes you want to quit being a musician because these guys are so good. But it's just one of the things that Chick Corea did. I mean, unfortunately, he died earlier this year, not of COVID. It was, I think it was a brain tumor or cancer. I'm not 100% sure, but and he was always one of my favorite jazz fusion players and keyboard players. So it's called the Electric Band. It was the first one that they made together, and there's some incredible music on there. If you're like jazz fusion, that genre at all, this one it's well worth to listen to hear these 4 guys playing together.
That's awesome. I just did a quick little search up. It says he died of a rare form of cancer, which had been only recently diagnosed. February 9th, 2021, at the age of 79. That's crazy.
And he was still playing right up until they found that out. Yeah, he was still playing.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, his big band was Return to Forever. Chick Corea and Return to Forever. But this is one of his little side projects that he did. And It was really incredible.
That's awesome. My suggestion for the beautiful listeners this week is to check out the 2006 album from the Australian metalcore band I Killed the Prom Queen. The album is called Music for the Recently Deceased. The song is called Say Goodbye. This had to get picked because I remember being in high school or in middle school when this came out, and I thought this was like the heaviest shit I've ever heard in my entire life. And then now going back and, rediscovering this kind of music, it was very evident that I didn't know anything. But so I Killed the Prom Queen, Say Goodbye, Music for the Recently Deceased. Go check it out.
Is that like the Beetlejuice handbook for the recently deceased?
Yeah. Yeah, this is to coincide with the book. You're like how you would watch The Wizard of Oz and listen to Dark Side at the same time, and it would match up. Yeah. The album does the same thing. So on that note, this is another episode of Rage Against the Mainstream podcast for the books. Once again, you can find us on our social medias, facebook.com/RATM podcast, Instagram and Twitter at RATM podcast, and YouTube search Rage Against the Mainstream podcast because we haven't received the subscriber account enough to be able to get a custom URL. But, help us boost those numbers up, like, share, subscribe. You can get us at our email, ratmpodcast@gmail.com. But until then, this is another episode of Rage Against the Mainstream podcast for the books. As always, I'm Bill.
I am Michael. Thanks for having me again.
Not a problem.
I'm going to go take a nap.
Have a good night, everyone. Thanks. Thank you for listening.